Welcome back for Keeper of the Lost Cities Nightfall, Chapters 62 and 63. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe so that you never miss a chapter, as it really does help me out. And this is Chapter 62. So, this must be the key, Sophie said, cradling the metal square so carefully to make sure the pieces stayed together. Lady Gisela said the archetype is locked, but I guess it makes sense that she'd keep the key and the book separate. But how is a metal square a key? Tam asked. I don't know, Sophie admitted, but I'm assuming it'll make more sense once we have the archetype. Perhaps I should hang on to that in the meantime, Mr. Forkel suggested, and have our technopath check it for tracking or listening devices. Wait, Fitz said as Sophie helped Mr. Forkel wrap the puzzle into a handkerchief. Lady Gisela knows we have this, right? Keith told her he found it. So? Keith asked. So? Then she has to know we're going to use it as soon as we get our hands on the archetype, doesn't she? Which doesn't make sense. I'd figured the reason she didn't give us some big threat about what would happen if we refused to turn the book over was because she knew we couldn't open it. So did I, Sophie admitted. Well, but this is my mom we're talking about, Keith reminded them. She probably thinks I'm too dumb to put the key together the right way. Actually, she doesn't underestimate you the way your dad does, Sophie told him. Every time I've talked with her, she's been frustrated that you weren't there. Only because she can't mess with my head, Keith mumbled. Or maybe she doesn't care if we read the archetype, Biana suggested. Maybe she thinks it'll make us want to work with her. She did say something about that, Sophie admitted. But Keith's mom had to know their truce was only temporary, and that they were never going to trust her. Which meant she had to have a plan for when it fell apart. What's especially strange is that she already handed over the journals, Mr. Forkel added. Mind you, she's leaving the bulk of the work of finding Nightfall to us. But that doesn't change the fact that we currently have no reason to return the archetype or the key to her. So either she's becoming an incredibly poor negotiator, or we're missing her next trick. Unless she's still counting on whatever she said to me before we went into the first Nightfall, Sophie said, hating the reminder. About how I'd be desperate to cut another deal because I'd need to restore my parents' sanity. She made it sound like this new Nightfall is super creepy. Keith glared at Mr. Forkel. Why didn't you tell me about that? Because I'm not convinced it was a valid threat. And even if it is, we can fix any damage done to Sophie's family by altering their memories. You still should have told me! Keith took Sophie by the shoulders. Don't let her get in your head, Foster. Remember, this is all just a game for her, and she'll say or do anything to win. Sophie's mouth still tasted sour. All I know is that my parents have been gone for... She stopped, deciding she didn't want to count how many days had passed. We have to get them out of there. We will, Keith promised, soon. Only if we get to work, Mr. Forkel said, gathering up the journals. I'll start translating these while the rest of you head to Eternalia, and then we'll exchange the notes tonight. Keith sighed. Come on, Forkel. You have to know I'm not going to waste time reading boring books. It's not a waste, Mr. Forkel argued. We need... Yeah, I caught your speech about why we need more information, Keith interrupted. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but do you really think it's smart to have 5 of us? He pointed to himself. Fitz, Tam, Biana, and Sophie, cooped up in a library looking for the same thing, especially since there's a good chance it's not even there. Don't forget about me, Lynn added. I can start helping tomorrow, or maybe even tonight, depending on how long it takes me with Wiley. Okay, so we're up to 6, Keith corrected. 6 of us, sitting in a stuffy archive, flipping through ancient scrolls. You really think that's the best way to go about this? I'm assuming you have another suggestion, Tiergan said. Yeah, we split up. Some of us stuck in Boringville, and some of us in Atlantis, searching street by street. I know it's a lot of ground to cover, but at least we know it's there. instead of just hoping we'll find something in a dusty old book. And I know you're worried about the Neverseen seeing us, but if we keep the group small and make sure we do something normal while we're there, like buying stuff for Foxfire, it should throw them off. And I'm assuming you expect Sophie to come with you, Grady asked. I don't expect Sophie to do anything, Keith said, turning back to her. I'm not trying to take control again, Foster. I promise. If you want to hit the books, go ahead, but I'm heading to Atlantis, okay? I'll go stir-crazy in that library. I won't be able to concentrate. Neither would she. I want to go to Atlantis, Sophie admitted. I'm not sure I can handle sitting around right now. I'm too antsy. Keith's smile was enormous. Whoa! Team Foster Keith is back! I'm in too, Fitz said. And me, Bianna added. Dude, I'm not going to be the only one stuck on library duty, Tam told them. But we're changing the team's name. We can't all be in, Keith reminded them. That's the point of splitting up. The only way this will work, Mr. Forkel said, is if you make a schedule and coordinate who's going and who's staying for each shift. You're free to divvy it up however you'd like, so long as there's always at least one goblin with whoever's in Atlantis. I'd point out that you'd be better off making sure they have an ogre with them, Ro jumped in. But your paranoid counselors told me I'm not allowed to be seen in your cities, which means, she turned to Keith, you're stuck in library land, assuming I can sneak into the building unnoticed. If not, you'll just have to catch up with everyone later. Believe me, I'm not happy about it either, but I'm not supposed to let you out of my sight, so... You left me when you went to Candleshade, he reminded her. That was different. You were on bed rest, and I rigged your traps around your room when I left. Keith's eyebrows shot up. Wow, good thing I didn't get out to pee. Ro's grin said it definitely was. Well, I don't need a babysitter, he told her. It's so precious that you think that. Look at him, guys, thinking he's all tough. I like her, Tam said. Keith shot him a glare that turned even colder when he directed it at Ro. I'm going to Atlantis, and if you try to stop me, I'll make sure you take the blame for a very unfortunate incident in Counselor Linus Castle and get banned from the Lost Cities. Ro studied her claws. Do that, and I'll make sure my dad retaliates. Really, that's the best you can do? Run to Daddy? Keith asked. Just because you have daddy issues doesn't mean we all do. Okay, Mr. Forkel said, stepping between them. In the interest of avoiding an interspecial incident, how about we provide extra security for Mr. Sensen so that you can blame us if anything happens, Ro? What kind of security? Ro asked. Me, Grady said, before Mr. Forkel could answer. Sophie was going to be touched by Grady's offer, until he added, I'm sure Keith's going to talk his way into all of Sophie's shifts, and I want to keep an eye on them. And if you doubt my abilities, keep in mind that I've made someone burn their own hand off. Ro looked mildly impressed, but she didn't agree until she looked at Keith. Fine, but only because he seems super bitter about this plan. What am I supposed to do while he's gone? I can bring you to Riverdrift, Tiergan offered. Lady Cadence has several of your father's best microbiologists working with her on the supporting antidote right now. An ogre party boat? Ro asked. I believe they're calling it a research vessel, Tiergan noted. Not once I get there. She wrapped her arm around Keith's shoulder and messed up his hair. Have fun with your chaperone. On that note, Tiergan, Lynn, Ro left, and Mr. Forkel and Alden followed, leaving Grady with the less than happy task of arbitrating while Sophie, Keith, Fitz, Bianna, and Tam fought over the Atlantis schedule. Sandor, Grizzle, and Waltzer added plenty of their own bickering, debating which one of them would cover security for each shift. And while Tam managed to force Keith into a few of the research time slots, he gave most of them to Lynn, not wanting her to spend too much time underwater. No matter how many times Bianna swore he was underestimating his sister. From there, they took time to map out the city, arranging each shift so that they would cover mostly new ground, but with enough overlaps to keep the visits from looking systematic if anyone was watching. And thus began the string of endless, exhausting days where Sophie's feet throbbed from all the walking, and her eyes went blurry from all the reading, and she stumbled from shift to shift in a daze. She didn't hear the jokes Keith cracked, or taste the treats Fist bought her, or resist Brianna's attempts to give her a makeover every time they pretended to shop, or weigh in when Tam and Lynn spent an entire Atlantis trip debating over which pet Lynn should adopt for the favor Tam owed her. Because every street that showed no trace of the symbol, every lengthy account of Atlantis' history with no mention of the facility, every update from Mr. Forkle confessing that he'd found nothing useful in the journals, it all felt like a ticking clock, growing louder and louder and louder. Dex and Bronte had yet to access a single secret on the caches. Lady Cadence hadn't made any progress on the Supportine, and they still didn't have any clue what the Neverseen were planning to do with it. And no matter how Livy tried, Alvar wouldn't wake up. Sophie forced a brave face every night when she checked in on her sister. But all the things they didn't say piled up between them, making the conversations feel as tense as their smiles. And before Sophie knew it, Foxfire was starting, and the panic hit hard. She spent her last research shift, just her, Keith, Sandor, Grady, and Roe, gathering the biggest stack of books she could carry, so she could at least do something after school. "Hey," Keith said, blocking her as she tried to scoot past where he'd been sitting in the long obsidian table. "Did you seriously think you could hide these from me?" He reached up and wiped off the tears trickling down her cheeks. She shrugged and looked away, hating that he'd caught her. She wasn't crying about the things she should be worrying about, the huge unsolvable problems that would surely affect everybody. She was being selfish and crying about the family she wouldn't even get to keep. "Okay, 2 choices," Keith told her, standing up and tilting her chin toward him. "You can tell me what's wrong, or I can put my empath powers to work. But keep in mind, option B will likely pick up all other kinds of feelings." Sophie gave him her surliest scowl, but he didn't back down. She looked away again, her eyes tracing the swirling facets in the dark ruby walls, which made the library look like it was made of jeweled mahogany. The room was probably supposed to feel cozy and opulent, but all Sophie saw was red. And still Keith waited, so she told him, "It's just, we're getting nowhere. And if we can't figure out when we're all working all around the clock, how is anything going to get done when we're all back at Foxfire and we have to let adults take over?" Grady snorted. "You know, most people consider adults to be better at these kinds of things than teenagers." Sophie and Keith shared a look and had to laugh. Grady sighed. "You two are definitely spending too much time together." "I take it that means you haven't joined Team Foster Keith?" Ro asked, "because I have to admit they're pretty cute together. Especially when she gets that look in her eye like she's going to tear his head off." "All I meant," Sophie said, doing her best to ignore Ro, "is that there's so much going on right now. We can't afford to lose 7 people. 11 if you count Bronte and Lady Cadence and Tiergan and Mr. She'd caught her slip just in time. "Darn! Almost got one of those juicy secrets," Ro said. "Though I'm pretty sure this means your wrinkly leader teaches at Foxfire." "It's called mentoring," Sophie corrected, "and you can believe whatever you want." "I will." Sophie hoped that meant Ro would stick with her Forkle's the mentor theory and not look so closely at the principal. "Anyway," Keith said, "if it feels like the grown-ups aren't pulling their weight, we can always No ditching," Sandor and Grady interrupted in unison. "Figured you guys would say that," Keith told them. "Even though you can't really stop us." He winked at Sophie. "But I think you're also forgetting, Foster, that we've managed to get a lot done when school is in session. We stopped the gnomish plague while going to Exilium, and you managed to look into the Everblaze while juggling midterms. You even got your abilities fixed and healed Alden during the first term this year." The word healed unleashed a whole other storm of panic. Her friends had been coming over every night to work on their script for Prentice, but everything they'd come up with was either too mushy or too cruel. Finding the right balance was starting to feel impossible. "Would it help if I'm there for the healing?" Keith offered. "I could keep track of Prentice's feelings, or I could..." He glanced at Ro, and his mouth shifted to a different word. "I could do what I did to calm you down. when we were in Ravagog. Ro rolled her eyes. Could you guys be any worse at hiding stuff? Sophie ignored her, remembering that soothing blue breeze that had eased her panic. That might actually be a good idea. Wow, you must be really scared if you're accepting my help that easily. Keith felt her forehead as if checking for a fever. You don't need to go to Elwyn, right? Sophie sighed, but the joke did help. The whole conversation had helped. Her eyes were dried, and that tick-tick-ticking in her ears quieted. And Keith knew it. His smile was adorably smug as he grabbed half of her books and helped her carry them home. Grady, meanwhile, was studying Keith like he'd never seen him before in his life. I'm glad you're back, Sophie told him, keeping her voice low, just for the two of them. Keith's smile turned unbearably sweet. Me too, Foster. Me too. Chapter 63. Returning to Foxfire felt every bit as wrong as Sophie had expected. But in small ways, it also felt right. Even with the worries ticking away in her head, and even with the pressure of finals already looming, there was something comforting about wearing her amber-brown uniform again, and watching Mr. Forkle appear as the sharp-featured, dark-haired Magnate Leto, and wandering the colorful halls, surrounded by laughter and gossip. It felt like proof that someday things truly would return to the way they'd been when she'd first moved to the Lost Cities and still had no idea the Neverseen existed. Still, there were definitely changes. Homework was a big one. In the past, Sophie had always been able to furnish her assignments in study hall, but study hall had been cut in half to add extra lecture time to each session. Her mentors had also doubled the workload to keep up with the accelerated curriculum, so every day, Sophie and her friends found themselves dragging home a thick stack of work that left almost no time for anything else. And while the adults did their best to pick up the slack, and gave Sophie lengthy updates every night to ease her mind, their reports were always filled with stories of failed attempts and false leads with little actual progress. Ro's presence on campus was another problem. Despite the stern lectures Magnate Leto kept giving at orientation every morning on how Ro was a distinguished guest and should be treated with honor and respect, the Ogre Princess didn't seem to mind the glares and whispers and screams. She even flashed claws and teeth to encourage them, but watching the other prodigies' reactions made Sophie feel uneasy. After spending time with Ro and seeing her intelligence and humor, obnoxious as both could sometimes be, Sophie finally understood why Lady Cadence would always defend the ogres, and it turned her stomach to see how deeply the elves' prejudices truly ran. Lunchtime was another complication. Jency chose not to sit with them, and Sophie couldn't totally blame him, thanks to how crowded their table had gotten, now that Tam, Lynn, and Morella were regulars, but it still made her sad every time he passed them to head over to the Drooly Boys, and she wished Maruka would stop claiming the seat next to her. As Wiley's cousin, Maruka knew all about Prentice's upcoming healing, and spent an hour asking so many questions that it turned the healing into its own kind of stressful countdown. 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1. Then Sophie was scrambling on shaky legs into the cozy mountain cabin that Prentice and Wiley were sharing, not sure if she was going to throw up or pass out, especially when she saw how many people were waiting for her. Sandor, Grizzle, and Ro chose to wait outside in order to patrol the surrounding forest, and the rest of the group had been limited only to those directly affected by Prentice's sacrifice, or those who could provide Sophie with any help or assistance. But the small wood-paneled room was still crammed with all 5 members of the collective, though Tiergan had left behind his rocky disguise for the day. Quinlan and Olivia had also arranged to leave Amy with Grady and Adeline in order to join them. And Alden, Della, Fitz, Keith, Tam, and Lynn all clumped together, their expressions as mixed as Sophie's tangled emotions. Wiley stood in the center of it all, next to a figure propped on a narrow bed, staring out the round window overlooking the snow-capped mountains. And Sophie could spot the changes in Prentice immediately. His usual dull, sweaty skin was now a rich, smooth umber. His blue eyes were clear, his tangled hair had been twisted neatly into smooth dreadlocks, and his full lips were miraculously drool-free. He looked calm, handsome even. No sign of the twitching or thrashing Sophie had gotten so used to seeing. Still, Sophie had to work up the courage to hold Wiley's piercing stare. She started with his arms, relieved to find no trace of the blisters that had marred his dark skin after the Neverseen's interrogation. Then she moved her gaze to the shoulders that looked even broader than she'd remembered, and finally to his face. His nose and lips were sharper than his father's, and his smile, the rare times she'd seen it, came from his mother. But his eyes were 100% Prentice's, and Sophie saw terror in those piercing blue depths, and uncertainty, and sorrow. But there was also hope, and peace, and gratitude. Sophie didn't feel worthy of the last emotion. After all Prentice had done to protect her, and all Wiley had endured because of that sacrifice, she owed them this. Had owed them for a very, very long time. "Remember," Mr. Forkel said, as he led Sophie into a carved wooden chair that had been set up next to Prentice. "Your goal is simply to catch Prentice up as much as you can and prepare him for what he'll find out when he wakes. We trust you to judge how much he can handle. And tell him I love him, okay?" Wiley added quietly. "Tell him I don't care how long it's been. I just want him back." "I will," she promised. "I'm right behind you," Fitz said, reaching for her hand. They'd decided to keep her gloves on, afraid enhancing would be too much for Prentice. "Squeeze my fingers if you need me to give you a boost. I'm also happy to help any way I can," Mr. Forkel promised. "As am I," Tiergan said, moving to stand beside Wiley. "Same goes for me," Alden said, clearing the trembling from his throat. He glanced at Quinlan, as if he expected his former cognate to make the same offer. But Quinlan was too busy staring at Prentice with a gazing, unreadable expression. "Wow, there are a lot of telepaths in this room," Keefe said as he took his place on Sophie's other side. "Good thing you were smart enough to also bring an empath. Deep breaths, Foster. You got this, and I've got your back. If I feel Prentice's emotions getting too intense, I'll do this." He clutched her shoulder, not tight enough to hurt, but enough to demand her attention. "So, if you don't feel me do that, then you don't have to worry, okay? And if I feel either of you losing control, I'm pulling off your glove and calming you both down. So just relax and do your Moonlark mind healing thing." "Not healing," Mr. Forkel corrected. "Just communicating. And if you need Mr. Tam to lift a veil of shadow vapor for any reason, all you have to do is say the word." "Or if Prentice needs to be sedated, I'm ready," Livy assured her, holding up a clear elixir. "Don't be afraid to abort if it's not going well," Tiergan added. "Even if it means putting things off another day, or week, or month. We'll wait." Sophie nodded blankly. Fitz leaned closer. "Just stick to the script, Sophie. It's a good one. You're ready." She blew out a breath. "Okay." Her eyes trailed back to Wiley, seeking that final assurance, and his shaky nod settled it. "All right, Prentice," she said as she closed her eyes and dove into his mental darkness. "Let's start bringing you back." That concludes chapters 62 and 63. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow. Bye!